if it were to be as valuable as people make up in their heads and to be the status symbol, then you wouldn't need more than one. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I just really feel like being chatty, and there's a certain topic that has been going around YouTube that I really want to share my 2 cents about, and that is whether or not the Birkin is just a status symbol or not. And I saw this being done on Je Suis Lou's channel, so I'll link to that video in the description bar below, but I thought that this is like such a great concept to talk about, and really this kind of goes for like all of luxury, but especially with anything like Hermes related. There's a lot of conversation that goes on sort of behind closed doors, but it's not often talked about online that much, and I for one have a lot of opinions about this. So without further ado, let's get right into it. First of all, I just wanted to start off by saying that I do love the Birkin, and I feel like eventually I would like to have one in my collection, and that there's nothing wrong with wanting it or going after it, but I think that there's a lot to sort of consider before buying it, just to know what you're actually getting into. I do think that there's a lot of value in just thinking about what the Birkin is actually made of, whether it's more of a concept than the actual bag itself. So in Lou's video, obviously she shows her bags and she talks about the whole process of getting them and how she was like super lucky with her essay, but I feel like that's a really good place to start. There's so much hype around the brand, and that getting one of these bags can change your status, like social status, from one thing to another just by getting a bag is something that I feel like is kind of a crazy concept that I feel like we've almost been like brainwashed to believe. I don't think that the Birkin is like a status symbol. At the end of the day, all the Birkin means is that you had X amount of money at a certain point in your life, that there was a relationship with somebody that had the bag, that offered it to you, and you said yes. And that sort of a transaction, I think it's so strange how we put it on a pedestal, because there are so many more things out there that are more expensive that people don't think twice about when people spend money on it. Like a car, for example, because literally there are a lot of Birkins that are more than the price of the average vehicle that's being driven around. And there isn't so much like questioning and desire for even some of these cars as there is a Birkin. And maybe it just has to do with the fact that like there's at least a perception of status behind money, and whether or not you buy into that, it's up to you. I just like to question whether or not it's more of a construct that we've sort of made up in our own heads as consumers from this brand. Is the Birkin actually valued at that? Like, does it bring that much value, and why is there so much value behind it? More than anything, it has to do with scarcity, and because of how things have been marketed, there's obviously a limited supply compared to the demand, and there's a lot of demand. There's nothing but demand, and demand is only rising, especially with what's going on in the world. People have excess money from not going on vacation and that sort of thing that they now have to spend on something as luxurious as a Birkin. So lately I've been questioning like, what actually is it when you're buying a Birkin? What is it? What is it about the bag? And there have to be people out there that think that it's not necessarily the most gorgeous bag that money can buy. There are thousands of different styles of purses that you could choose from. Why is it always the Birkin that people gravitate to? Is it just that it is the most beautiful? I don't think so, because as the phrase goes, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So I just don't buy that everybody thinks that this is the most beautiful bag in the entire world, and that's why it's so coveted. So here's what I've come to realize. This isn't any sort of a dig at Hermes. I think that the brand has done incredible at positioning itself in the way that it has. But here's just my perspective. Birkins are only a state of mind. It's an emotional state, and it's one that makes you feel so realized and recognized. among a group of people that won't get that opportunity. So really, it's so much more emotional than people realize, and people are willing to spend so much money to feel a way that they don't think that they possibly can without being fulfilled by a handbag. And whether or not you agree or disagree with that, at the end of the day, there's no real other explanation as to why these things can be valued as much as they are, even if those bags were made out of the most precious leathers. And yes, the hardware, if it's gold, is gold plated, and there are precious metals involved, but all of that combined, the total value of the bag has to do so much more with the value that we as consumers place on it than the actual cost, which is why they're profitable to Hermès, is because there's a cost and there's a markup and there's the price that it's actually being sold for. And there's a huge gap in between that is what their profit is, and that's why they've kept going, and that's why the fashion house has sustained itself for so many years, is just because the value that people place on their goods is different than what they actually cost. If we were to actually break down like the different leathers, yes, there's a lot of them. There's Swift, there's Epsom, there's Tadillac, there's Togo. There are more than I can count at this specific moment in time. And that just goes to show that yes, the bag is basically made out of leather. There are other variations of it. When it comes down to it, leather is just the product of a cow. Can one cow be so more highly valued than another? And is there something that goes into one that just makes it more prestigious for Hermès to want to cultivate products from? It's not even so much Hermès anymore. It's not the value of the raw materials. It's the value that we as consumers place on it. And it's more of like a concept and an idea, maybe even an ideal to some people. But there's so much more than meets the eye when it comes to getting one of these handbags and what it actually means, because it only means something to people that value it. And if there's one sort of takeaway from this, I think it's just to realize that even if the Birkin is the bag that you covet the most, or is a dream to own, or is the goal bag, or the holy grail as it's been called so many times, that it's only valuable because you've placed value on it. So if you've built up sort of momentum in your head about what it's gonna be like the moment that you're offered one, it's natural that that moment can only last so long. It's actually been proven that the anticipation of a moment actually is greater than the utility or the value that you get out of the moment that you've been anticipating. I think that that's such a huge realization, and especially when it comes to the Birkin, like you can dream about it for years, but if you don't realize that part of the value of getting the Birkin is the value over the years that you've been thinking about in that anticipation. And it's like the adrenaline rush when you think that maybe an offer is gonna come and that you're actually finally gonna get the bag, or especially if it's a special offer, it's the one that you've been dreaming of down to the T, like down to choosing the stitching that's on the bag. It's not because that thread is more valuable, it's because of the value that you place on it. Whether or not you buy into that is completely your choice, because if you decide to value a pair of Nike sneakers, then that's going to be what is the most fulfilling for you. And one of the things that I've sort of recognized along this process of just thinking whether or not the Birkin is a status symbol or whether or not it just carries that much inherent value itself is noticing that you're in complete control of your own thoughts. And I know this is sort of getting a little bit deep, but just thinking about how tens of thousands of dollars can either go towards a bag or it can go towards something else. It's completely your choice, and it's completely your choice as to whether or not the Birkin will add value to your life. If you think about the next day and possibly after getting a bag, wanting the next one. That's a huge factor in sort of detracting value, is that afterwards, like, why do people have Birkin collections? Because if it's so valuable, then why wasn't the first one enough to sort of satisfy the craving or scratch the itch? Because if it were to be as valuable as people make up in their heads and to be the status symbol, then you wouldn't need more than one. In this conversation, I hope that you just take time to consider what it is that you're buying, if a Birkin, like it is for me, is a goal for you to own, and what you're actually going to be owning, and whether or not it's going to be enough. Because I've found, just with the luxury purchases that I've made over the past few years, just to note that the thought that you have going into something and the emotions that you're thinking you're gonna feel once you actually get that, and what I anticipate an offer for a Birkin to be is like such a moment, and really you don't think about afterwards. So if you just take a little bit of time to think about how your life will genuinely, honestly be changed from a moment that you've built up so much in your head, is something that I think is really important to do. Not just from buying the Birkin specifically, but just being sort of part of this community that enjoys and values luxury and luxurious things, is just think about a week afterwards or a month after you get it, and be critical of the things that you've already bought and how they make you feel today, like right now in this moment. Are they still bringing you the same joy? And can things actually spark joy? I know Marie Kondo has been quoted so many times for that line, and I think it's definitely worth questioning when you're cleaning out your closet, for example, or you're going through things or trying to define what is actually going to spark joy in your life. Is it going to come from things? Is that what you're actually buying, is an emotional state? I think it's worth questioning, and I would love to hear what you have to say about all of this in the comments down below, and trust me, I will respond to each and every one of you. And I'm really happy to be able to have this opportunity and this platform to be able to talk about things that might be a little bit deeper than something as surface as buying another handbag, because we all know that to each of us, it's not just a handbag. You're buying so much more than that. I'm really grateful that this tag was going around and that I could be a part of it, whether or not the Birkin is a status symbol or not. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you very, very soon in my next one. Bye guys.